Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. I'm glad you're here. I'm Joel Thielke, and welcome to Sleep Stories and Meditation. With the holidays just around the corner, life can feel a little extra busy. So tonight, let's take a pause and dive into a story that brings a touch of calm and a sprinkle of magic to your day. Before we begin, if you enjoy this podcast, don't forget to share it and check out motivationalhypnotherapy.com for more hypnosis, meditation, and affirmation programs. Tonight's story is a fantasy called Dreamer's Quest Meditation, a Bedtime Story, set in the tranquil floating kingdom of Leora, where cloud temples shimmer in the twilight. This tale weaves ancient magic with timeless wisdom. Leora is a peaceful haven, suspended among the clouds, a perfect escape for a dreamy bedtime journey. So find your cozy spot, settle in, and let the story carry you to a world of wonder and relaxation. Enjoy.
Take a moment for yourself before we begin. If you'd like, we'll take a few deep breaths together to help you relax and settle in. Or, if you prefer, you can skip ahead right to the story. It's completely your choice. No matter what, you're going to have a wonderful experience. For those staying with me, let's start. Take a deep breath in. Fill your lungs completely. And as you exhale, gently close your eyes. Feel your shoulders drop as you let go of the day. Focus on the rhythm of your breathing. Inhale deeply through your nose. Hold it for a moment, and then exhale softly through your mouth, releasing any tension in your body. Picture a wave of relaxation starting at the top of your head, washing down through your neck, shoulders, arms, and all the way to your fingertips. Another deep breath in, and, as you exhale, feel that wave travel down your back, through your legs, and all the way to your toes. With each breath, you're sinking deeper into calm, letting go of the day, and getting ready to drift into the story ahead. Now, whenever you're ready, you can stay here, breathing and relaxing a little longer. Tonight's experience is yours to enjoy, just the way you want it. Prologue. Whispers of Destiny. The cloud temples of Leora pierced the sunset sky like luminescent spears, their alabaster spires floating impossibly among sheets of rose-gold mist. Far below, the common quarters hung suspended by ancient magics, connected by bridges that seemed spun from moonlight and morning dew. The floating kingdom had stood this way for generations, its very existence a testament to the marriage of wisdom and power. High in the eastern spire, Mara traced her fingers along the temple's crystalline walls, feeling the pulse of magic that flowed through the kingdom's veins. Her ceremonial robes whispered against the polished floor as she made her way to the Chamber of Visions. Behind her, the sounds of the noble quarter's evening festivities drifted up, celebration of another law restricting access to the temple's knowledge. "Sister," Casimir said sternly, "the council session isn't finished." Mara turned to face her brother, Casimir. Once they'd shared everything, dreams, secrets, vision for Leora's future. Now his face bore the stern mask of political ambition, all traces of the boy who'd once dreamed of flying beyond the clouds long buried. "The session ended the moment you declared wisdom a commodity to be bought and sold," she replied softly. "What would our parents say, Casimir? They taught us that true power grows when shared. They taught us to protect Leora." Casimir's voice hardened. "The common folk aren't ready for the temple's deeper mysteries. You've seen how they abuse even the simplest magics." Because we give them trinkets without understanding. Mara pressed her hand against the crystal wall, and it pulsed with her emotion. The founders meant for wisdom to flow like air, available to all who would breathe it in. Casimir stepped closer, his shadow falling across her face. Your idealism will destroy everything we've built. These restrictions protect our people. They protect your power. Mara met his gaze. And they're killing the very heart of Leora. She slipped past him into the chamber of visions, where the evening light fractured through crystal facets into 1,000 dancing colours. As she reached the central altar, the air grew thick with possibility. Magic surged through her, and the chamber filled with shifting images. Darkness spreading through Leora's foundations. Wisdom twisted into chains, but beyond that, a glimpse of 2 young women, cousins, their joined hands bringing light to shadow. Hope and grief tangled in Mara's chest. She touched her pendant, feeling the warmth of an ancient magic pulse against her skin. Tomorrow she will begin the work that might cost her everything, including her life. But her daughter would live, and someday she would help restore the balance that was about to be broken. I'm sorry, brother, she whispered to the empty air, but some truths must be preserved, even at the cost of everything else. The sun set behind the floating kingdom, and in its fading light, destiny began to turn. Chapter 1. A World Above. Alora's feet dangled over the edge of the floating garden, her eyes fixed on the distant spires of the cloud temples. At 15 years old, she found more comfort in these hidden perches than in her father's modest house below. The morning mist curled around her ankles like a curious cat, while skyships drifted between Leora's suspended districts, their crystalline sails catching the early light. I knew I'd find you up here. Eleanor emerged from behind a flowering archway, her noble's robes immaculate despite the climb. Though only a few months older than Alora, she carried herself with the practiced grace of her station. Your father's guards are looking for you again, Alora said softly, not moving from her perch. He always has someone searching for me. Elena settled beside her, somehow making even that casual motion look elegant. Father's always having someone look for me. He thinks I spend too much time in the lower quarters. Does he know you're here? Alora asked, her voice tinged with concern. With you? Elena laughed, her voice holding a touch of defiance. Never. He'd have 3 fits and lock me in my chambers. Their unlikely friendship had begun 2 years ago, when Elena had slipped away from her escorts and found Alora reading in this same garden. Something had clicked between them instantly, a shared curiosity about the world beyond their assigned places in it. 2 more figures appeared through the mist. Kai, with his perpetual grin and watchful eyes, and Lyra, who moved like she was always listening to distant music. Their small circle was complete. The guards passed below, Kai reported, dropping into a crouch. They're heading toward the market district. Lyra settled cross-legged on a patch of moss. Did you tell them about the dream, Alora? Dream? Eleanor leaned forward, her voice lowering. I don't think it's just a dream. Alora nodded slowly. Last night's vision still burned bright in her mind, crystal spires glowing with power, wisdom flowing like water through Leora's veins. I saw the temples as they used to be, before all the restrictions. There was so much light. It felt like the very essence of wisdom was alive. My father says the restrictions protect us, Elena said, but her tone held doubt. That common folk aren't ready for deeper magic. Your father says a lot of things, Kai muttered, earning a sharp look from Lyra. But sometimes words are just that, words. Something's changing, Alora said suddenly. I can feel it in the air, in the stones themselves, like the kingdom is holding its breath. A bell tolled in the noble quarter, making Elena jump. I have to go. Council session this afternoon. Can't afford to miss it. Same time tomorrow? Alora asked, her voice a mixture of hope and apprehension. Eleanor paused at the garden's edge. Always. We made a pact, remember? No matter what happens, this place is ours. As Eleanor disappeared into the mist, Alora touched the worn stone beneath her. Power thrummed through it, faint but persistent, like a heartbeat waiting to strengthen. Something big is coming. Your father's been teaching you the old ways again, hasn't he? Lyra asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Alora nodded. Every night her father shared another piece of Leora's true history, another fragment of wisdom the council pretended didn't exist. She didn't understand why he chose now to reveal so much, but the urgency in his voice grew stronger with each passing day. Something's coming, she repeated, more to herself than her friends, and I think we're meant to be ready for it. The morning mist began to thin, revealing the vast expanse of sky below. Somewhere in that endless blue, the world went on without floating kingdoms and crystal magic. But here in Leora, ancient power stirred, and 4 children sat in a hidden garden, unknowingly perched on the edge of destiny. Chapter 2. The Festival of Lights. The annual Festival of Lights transformed Leora's floating districts into a sea of lanterns and crystalline radiance. Bridges between quarters shimmered with enchanted flames, and skyships sailed lazy circles through clouds tinted gold by the setting sun. Alora watched from her father's doorway as revelers from every quarter filled the streets. For one night, the strict boundaries between noble and common blurred, allowing everyone to celebrate the kingdom's founding together. You should be out there, her father said softly, appearing behind her. Theron's scholar's robes were worn at the edges, but his eyes held the same sharp intelligence that had once made him the council's most trusted advisor. Your friends will be waiting. What about you? Alora asked. He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. I have work to finish. Important work. Before Alora could question him further, she spotted Eleanor weaving through the crowd, accompanied by Kai and Lyra. Her noble's robes had been replaced by simple festival garments, making her almost indistinguishable from any other celebrant. There you are. Elena grabbed Alora's hand. The storyteller's about to begin in the central square. They made their way through streets filled with music and laughter. Merchants sold glowing crystals and blessed charms, while street performers demonstrated simple magics that made children gasp with delight. The crowd in the central square parted respectfully for the elderly storyteller as she took her place beneath the floating lanterns. Her voice carried clearly across the gathered audience. Long ago, when wisdom flowed like water through our kingdom, the founders discovered something remarkable. Power, they learned, grew strongest not when hoarded, but when shared freely among all people. Alora felt Elena tense beside her. This wasn't the usual approved version of Leora's founding. A sudden hush fell over the crowd as a figure in council robes appeared at the square's edge. But instead of stopping the storyteller, the woman simply stood listening, her face hidden in shadow. The tale continued, speaking of ancient prophecies and coming changes. As the storyteller's words washed over them, Alora felt that familiar hum of power in the stones beneath her feet, stronger tonight than ever before. When the story ended, the council member moved forward. The crowd parted, but she walked directly to Alora. From within her robes, she withdrew a crystal pendant that caught the festival lights and transformed them into dancing colors. "For you," she said softly, pressing it into Alora's palm. "When the time comes, remember, true wisdom cannot be contained." Before anyone could react, she vanished into the crowd, leaving Alora holding a pendant that pulsed with warmth against her skin. Elena stared at the crystal. "That was Lady Sarah, my aunt. But father said she died years ago." The festival continued around them, but the four friends stood frozen in their own pocket of stillness, watching the pendant shimmer with possibilities yet unknown. Chapter 3. Secrets Revealed. The hidden chamber beneath Alora's house had existed long before her father took residence there. Tonight it held 4 children and a crystal that refused to stop glowing. "It's been pulsing like that since the festival," Alora explained, setting the pendant on an ancient reading table. Their faces reflected in its facets, transformed by its inner light. "My aunt gave it to you," Eleanor whispered. "But why? And how is she even alive?" Before anyone could answer, the crystal flared brilliantly. In its light, a figure appeared, a woman with silver hair and familiar eyes. "Alora." The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "If you're seeing this, then the time has come. The pendant you hold belonged to your mother, and through it flows the truth the council tried to bury." The chamber fell silent. Alora had never known her mother, had never even seen an image of her. But now... The door above creaked. All 4 children froze as footsteps descended the stairs. "Peace, young ones." An elderly woman emerged from the shadows, her simple robes belying the power that radiated from her. "I am Mira, and I've been waiting a very long time to meet you." "You're the truth speaker," Lyra breathed. "The one they say disappeared when the council seized control of the temples." Mira nodded, her eyes fixed on the still glowing pendant. "Your mother left this for you, Alora. She knew what was coming, what is still coming. The council's grip on power grows tighter each day, but they fail to see that in squeezing wisdom, they strangle the very heart of Leora." "My father," Eleanor started, then hesitated. "Lord Casimir was not always as he is now," Mira said gently. "Fear can transform even the noblest heart. But that's why you 4 have been brought together. The prophecies speak of wisdom restored not through force, but through understanding, through bonds that transcend the artificial barriers we've built." The pendant's light enveloped them all, and in its glow, Alora saw glimpses of what was to come, challenges that would test them, truths that would shake Leora to its foundations. And through it all, 4 friends standing together, bridging the divide between what was and what could be. Chapter 4. Bonds Strengthened. Under Mira's guidance, their training began in earnest. Each day brought new discoveries of abilities long suppressed by the council's restrictions. Lyra's connection to healing magics emerged first. Her gentle touch could mend not just flesh, but the subtle energies that flowed through Leora's foundations. Serafina discovered her music could weave spells of protection and clarity. Kai's natural athleticism evolved into an uncanny ability to manipulate the air currents that sustained their floating kingdom. Elena struggled initially. generations of noble restraint fighting against the raw power in her blood. But when she finally broke through, her strategic mind proved perfect for understanding the complex patterns of temple magic. Alora's pendant grew stronger with each passing day. Through it, she began to sense the vast network of power that connected every part of Leora. Sometimes, in quiet moments, she caught glimpses of her mother's face, felt echoes of her wisdom. "The pendant doesn't give you power," Mira explained during one session. "It awakens what was always there. Your mother knew that true strength lies not in controlling magic, but in understanding it." The four friends trained in secret places, forgotten gardens, abandoned temple annexes, the hidden chamber beneath Alora's house. Each location held its own mysteries, its own fragments of knowledge waiting to be rediscovered. Together, they learned to combine their abilities in ways that made their individual powers stronger. When they worked as one, even Mira seemed amazed by what they could accomplish. "This is what Leora was meant to be," she told them one evening. "Not divided by walls of privilege and fear, but united in the pursuit of understanding." As their powers grew, so did their awareness of the challenges ahead. The council's influence pressed heavier on the kingdom with each passing day, but in their small circle, hope flourished like the ancient gardens they'd learned to tend. They were no longer just friends sharing secrets. They were becoming something more, a bridge between what Leora had become and what it was always meant to be. Chapter 5. Shadows in the Council. The council chamber rose through the heart of Leora's central spire, its crystal walls reflecting the cold light of dawn. Lord Casimir stood at its peak, looking down at the assembled council members with carefully controlled frustration. Reports of unauthorized magic use increased daily. Malik, his most trusted advisor, announced. Common folk speak of prophecies. They whisper about change. "Your own daughter has been seen in the lower quarters," another council member added. "Consorting with—" "I'm aware of Elena's indiscretions," Casimir cut in sharply. His daughter's friendship with Theron's girl troubled him more than he cared to admit. Something about Alora stirred memories he'd fought hard to bury. "The signs are clear," Malik continued. "The old powers stir. If we don't act soon—" "Increase surveillance on the lower quarters," Casimir ordered. "Any unauthorized use of temple magic is to be reported immediately. And Elena—" He paused, ancient guilt warring with present fear. "Have her activities monitored as well." As the council dispersed, Malik lingered. His dark eyes held secrets Casimir preferred not to examine too closely. "There's something else you should know. The truth speaker has been seen." Casimir's hand tightened on the crystal railing. "Mira was exiled years ago. Yet she walks among us again. And there are whispers." Malik stepped closer, voice dropping. "Whispers about your sister's pendant." The chamber's temperature seemed to plummet. Casimir turned away, but not before Malik saw the flash of pain cross his face. "Find them," Casimir commanded. "Find them all." But in his heart, a long-dormant seed of doubt began to take root. Chapter 6. The Vision. Alora sat cross-legged in the hidden chamber, her mother's pendant warm against her palms. Mira's voice guided her through the meditation, but something felt different tonight. The crystal's pulse matched her heartbeat, and suddenly the chamber dissolved around her. She found herself standing in a vast space filled with swirling mist and floating lights. Before her stood a woman she'd only glimpsed in visions. Silver hair, eyes that mirrored her own. "Mother," Alora whispered. My brave girl. Mara's voice held joy and sadness in equal measure. There's so little time. The darkness your uncle fears has taken root in his own heart, spreading through Leora like poison. Images flashed through the mist. Council chambers corrupted by fear, temple magic twisted into chains, wisdom turned to weapon. But there's hope, Mara continued. You and your friends, you're learning to use power the way it was meant to be used, through understanding, through connection. How can we stand against the entire council? By remembering what they've forgotten, true power cannot be contained. It must flow freely, like air, like light. Mara's form began to fade. Trust in what you've learned, trust in each other, and remember, I am always with you. Alora jerked back to consciousness, tears streaming down her face. Her friends huddled around her, Eleanor gripping her hand tight. You saw her, didn't you? Eleanor whispered. Your mother? Alora nodded, the vision's urgency still thrumming through her veins. We need to move faster. The council, they're planning something that could change everything. In the shadows, Mira watched with ancient eyes that held both worry and hope. The time for hiding was nearly over. Chapter 7. Echoes of the Past. A stranger arrived at dawn. He wore robes that shimmered like starlight, and his presence made the very air vibrate with power. Orion, he called himself, though Mira greeted him as an old friend. The temples remember, he told them, gathered in their hidden sanctuary. Every stone, every crystal, holds the memory of what Leora once was, and what it could be again. Under his guidance, they learned to access the astral plane, the realm of pure wisdom that existed beyond physical reality. Here, Alora found she could connect more deeply with her mother's presence. Your mother wasn't just a rebel against the council, Orion explained. She was a guardian of ancient knowledge. She understood that wisdom isn't just information. It's alive, growing, evolving with each generation. Through meditation and practice, they learned to navigate the astral plane together. Elena's political knowledge merged with Alora's intuitive understanding. Kai's protective instincts found new expression in energy manipulation, while Lyra's healing abilities expanded beyond the physical. My father, Eleanor said during one session, he speaks of you sometimes. In his sleep, he calls out to the Star Walker. Casimir was once my student, Orion admitted, as was your mother, Alora. Before fear turned wisdom to weapon, we all walked these paths together. The message from Mara grew stronger in the astral plane. Time was running out. The council's grip tightened daily, but with it came the seeds of their own undoing. They had to be ready when those seeds bloomed. Chapter 8. Seeds of Rebellion. Their movement grew in whispers and shadows. Elena gathered intelligence from the palace, noting guard rotations and council movements. Each piece of information became part of their expanding network. The lower quarters are ready for change, Kai reported during a secret meeting. People are tired of being denied their birthright to wisdom. Alora and her friends worked tirelessly to prepare. In hidden gardens and forgotten chambers, they taught others what they'd learned. Simple magics at first, then deeper mysteries as trust grew. The council's response was swift and harsh. Increased patrols, stricter penalties for unauthorized magic. But their very oppression fueled the growing resistance. They feel it, Mira observed. The old powers awakening. It terrifies them. Through it all, Orion continued their training, pushing them to levels of understanding that would have been forbidden under council law. Each day brought them closer to the confrontation they all knew was coming. Elena's reports grew more urgent. Father's inner circle speaks of a final solution. Whatever they're planning, it's happening soon. In the astral plane, Mara's presence grew stronger. The time of hiding was nearly over. The seeds of rebellion had taken root, and soon they would bloom in the heart of Leora itself. Chapter 9. Confrontation at the Plaza. The central plaza is filled with people from every quarter of Leora. What began as a peaceful assembly quickly became something more as Alora stepped forward, her mother's pendant glowing visibly through her robes. For too long, wisdom has been locked away, her voice carried across the crowd. The temple's power belongs to all of us. Eleanor emerged from the noble section, crossing the invisible boundary to stand beside her cousin. The crowd gasped, Lord Casimir's daughter, openly defying council law. The guards moved in, but magic rippled through the air. Not aggressive, but transformative. The pendant's light spread, awakening memories in the very stones beneath their feet. "Stop this at once!" Casimir's voice boomed across the plaza. He strode forward, Malik at his side. "Elena, return to your place." "My place is here, Father." Elena's voice held firm. "With the truth." Power surged through the plaza as more hidden practitioners revealed themselves. The moment of confrontation had arrived, but not as the council expected. This was no violent rebellion. It was an awakening. Malik raised his hands, dark energy crackling. But before he could strike, ancient magic rose from Leora's foundations, responding to the combined will of its people. The time for secrets was over. Chapter 10. The Turning Tide. The plaza hummed with awakened power. Citizens from every quarter joined hands, sharing wisdom long denied. The council's control began to crumble as ancient truths resurfaced through the very stones of Leora. The air itself seemed to vibrate with possibility as generations of suppressed knowledge burst free. Casimir stood frozen, watching as nobles and commoners alike turned away from his authority. The sight of his daughter and niece, standing together, unleashed memories he'd fought so hard to suppress. Images of his sister flooded back, their childhood dreams, their shared vision for Leora. The moment fear had poisoned everything. "Brother," Mara's voice echoed through the pendant, filling the plaza with its ethereal resonance. "Remember who we were meant to be. Remember what Leora was before fear turned wisdom to weapon." Elena approached her father, while Alora maintained the flow of power through the crowd. The pendant's light wrapped around them all, revealing the threads of connection that had always existed beneath artificial barriers of rank and privilege. "The restrictions were never about protection," Elena said softly, reaching for her father's hand. "They were about fear, your fear, the council's fear. But look around, Father. Look at what happens when we trust instead of fear." Throughout the plaza, spontaneous demonstrations of ancient magic bloomed. Healers from the lower quarters worked alongside noble scholars, combining practical wisdom with theoretical knowledge. Children taught simple spells to elders, while temple guardians laid down their weapons to join the growing circle of shared power. Something shifted in Casimir's stance. Decades of certainty wavered as he looked between his daughter and his niece, seeing echoes of his sister in both. The rigid mask of authority cracked, revealing glimpses of the man he'd once been, the brother who had dreamed alongside Mara of a kingdom united by wisdom. "I thought I was protecting us," he whispered, his voice carrying in the charged air. every restriction, every law. I truly believed they were necessary. They never were, Alora replied, her mother's pendant pulsing with gentle light. True wisdom protects itself by growing stronger when shared. That's what Mother tried to tell you. Throughout Leora, change rippled like waves through still water. The barriers between quarters began to dissolve, not through violence, but through understanding. Gardens long dormant burst into bloom. Fountains that had run dry for generations began flowing with luminescent water. The very foundations of the floating kingdom hummed with renewed vitality. Nobles who had initially recoiled from common folk found themselves drawn into conversations about ancient law and practical applications. Temple guards who had enforced separation now helped bridge divides. Even the most conservative council members couldn't deny the tangible benefits as long-suppressed wisdom began flowing freely once again. The tide had turned, but not through force or rebellion. Instead, it was transformation through remembrance, through the reawakening of what Leora had always been meant to be. A kingdom where wisdom flowed as freely as air itself, growing stronger with each person who dared to share rather than hoard. In the spreading light, Alora and Eleanor stood with their hands clasped, bridging past and future, noble and common, fear and trust. Around them, their floating kingdom began its journey back to wholeness, one shared truth at a time. Chapter 11. Malik's Exile. As dawn broke over the transformed plaza, Malik stood alone, darkness crackling around him, his face contorted with desperate fury as he watched decades of careful manipulation crumble. "You fools!" he snarled, drawing on forbidden magics. "You have no idea what you've unleashed." Dark energy pulsed from his hands, threatening to corrupt the very foundations of Leora. But the combined power of awakened wisdom proved stronger. Alora and Elena channeled their energy through the pendant, creating a barrier of pure light. Behind them, citizens from every quarter added their strength, transforming Malik's darkness into purifying radiance. "It's over, Malik." Casimir stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of truth rather than force. "I see now what you've been doing all these years, twisting my fear into weapons against my own people." The guards who had once enforced Malik's will turned their backs on him. His power, built on manipulation and control, dissolved in the face of freely shared wisdom. "Exile," Casimir pronounced, with Eleanor and Alora's support. "Let him walk the lands below, where perhaps he'll learn what true power means." As Malik was led away, his final glare promised this wouldn't be the end. But Leora had changed too fundamentally to ever again fall under the shadow of fear and control. The pendant's light softened but didn't fade, a reminder that vigilance would always be needed to maintain wisdom's free flow. Chapter 12. A New Dawn. Casimir stood before the assembled kingdom, Eleanor and Alora at his side. The morning light caught the crystal spires of the cloud temples, now open to all who sought wisdom. "Today we begin anew," he announced. "No more divisions between noble and common, no more hoarding of knowledge." His voice cracked slightly as he continued, "And no more secrets, including one I've kept far too long." He turned to Elena. "Your aunt, Mara, was more than just a rebel against the council. She was a visionary who understood what I refused to see. And her daughter—" He looked at Alora, years of guilt evident in his eyes. "My niece stands before you now." The revelation rippled through the crowd. Eleanor reached for Alora's hand, their shared blood now known to all. "Together, they've shown us what Leora can be," Casimir continued. "Not a kingdom divided by fear, but united in pursuit of understanding. The reforms began immediately. The council was restructured, with representatives from all quarters. The temple's knowledge was systematically shared, with wisdom keepers from both noble and common backgrounds working together to ensure proper understanding. As the sun rose higher, Alora felt her mother's presence through the pendant, not as a ghost or memory, but as a dream finally realized. Leora was transforming into what it was always meant to be, a beacon of shared wisdom floating among the clouds. Elena squeezed her cousin's hand. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" Alora nodded, watching as their kingdom embraced its new dawn. Chapter 13. Legacies and Futures. 6 months passed as Leora flourished under its new order. The cloud temples buzzed with activity as knowledge flowed freely between all quarters. Kai had taken a leadership role in temple security, reimagining it as a force for protection rather than restriction. Lyra's healing practices combined noble law with common wisdom, creating new forms of medicine that benefited all. Alora sat in her mother's former chamber, now restored to its original purpose as a place of learning. The pendant still pulsed warmly against her skin, though its urgent glow had softened to a steady illumination. "Your mother would be proud," Orion said, appearing in his characteristic way. Though her sacrifice brought pain, it also planted the seeds of transformation. Around them, Leora continued to evolve. Skyships now carried wisdom seekers from distant lands, drawn by tales of the floating kingdom where knowledge flowed like air. The barriers between quarters had dissolved, replaced by natural communities based on shared interests and abilities. Elena entered, her noble robes now intermixed with practical elements that reflected her dual role as both leader and student. "The outer kingdoms are requesting guidance," she announced. "They see what we've built here and want to understand." Alora smiled, feeling the familiar surge of possibility. "Then we'll share what we've learned, just as we always should have." As Orion prepared for departure, his work in Leora complete, the kingdom glowed with renewed purpose. The legacy of the dreamers, of Mara, of all who had fought for this transformation, lived on in every shared piece of wisdom, every barrier broken, every new understanding gained. The floating kingdom had become what it was always meant to be, not just a wonder among the clouds, but a beacon of hope for all who sought true wisdom. Chapter 14. Legacies and Futures. The morning sun painted Leora's floating districts in shades of gold and rose, catching on newly restored fountains and awakened gardens. 6 months had transformed the kingdom so completely that sometimes Alora had to pause and remember how it used to be. She sat in her mother's former chamber in the highest spire of the cloud temples, now restored to its original purpose as a place of learning. Students from all quarters moved freely through the space, their conversations a mixture of theoretical discourse and practical application. The pendant still pulsed warmly against her skin, though its urgent glow had softened to a steady illumination. Kai stood at the chamber's entrance, his new role as head of temple security evident in his bearing but not diminishing his easy smile. Under his guidance, the guards had been transformed from enforcers to protectors, ensuring wisdom flowed safely rather than restricting its movement. "The lower garden classes are overflowing again," he reported. "Lyra's combining noble healing techniques with village remedies. The results are—" He shook his head in amazement. "Well, you should see for yourself." Lyra had emerged as one of their greatest bridges between old and new knowledge. Her healing center in the former restricted quarter now served everyone from council members to market vendors, each patient contributing their own wisdom to an ever-growing pool of understanding. "Your mother would be proud," Orion said, materializing from the morning light. Though her sacrifice brought pain, it planted the seeds of this transformation. Look at what has grown from them. Around them, Leora pulsed with renewed vigor. Skyships from distant lands docked at newly constructed platforms, bringing wisdom seekers drawn by tales of the floating kingdom, where knowledge flowed like air. The rigid divisions between quarters had dissolved, replaced by natural communities based on shared interests and abilities. In the former noble quarter, now called the Heritage District, Elena had transformed her father's mansion into an archive and meeting place. She entered the chamber now, her robes reflecting her evolution, traditional noble elements seamlessly blended with practical features that spoke of hands-on learning. "The Outer Kingdoms are requesting guidance," she announced, spreading a map across the ancient reading table. 3 delegations arrived this morning alone. They see what we've built here and want to understand how to replicate it. Casimir, who had been quietly observing from a window alcove, stepped forward. His face bore new lines of humility, but also a peace that had been absent during his years of rigid control. They must understand this wasn't achieved through force or decree. It grew from trust, from the courage to share rather than hoard. "And from loss," Alora added softly, touching her pendant. Through it, she felt her mother's presence, not as a ghost, but as wisdom preserved and transformed. From sacrifices that showed us what really mattered. Seraphina's music drifted up from the lower chambers, where she taught the ancient art of harmonic magic. Songs that could heal, protect, and illuminate. Her melodies carried through Leora's crystalline structures, making the very kingdom sing with possibility. As Orion prepared for departure, his work in Leora complete, he shared one final insight. The greatest power was never in the magic itself, but in the choice to share it. Remember that, especially as your influence grows. The chamber filled with morning light, catching on crystal walls and students' eager faces. Each seeker who came to learn carried away not just knowledge, but understanding of what real power meant, the strength found in sharing, in breaking down barriers, in choosing trust over fear. Alora moved to the chamber's balcony, Elena at her side. Below them, their transformed kingdom glowed with renewed purpose. Gardens once restricted to nobles now bloomed for all. Children played in fountains that sprayed luminescent water into the cloud-swept air. Wisdom keepers from every background shared their knowledge freely in open forums and quiet corners. "We've only just begun, haven't we?" Eleanor asked, watching a group of young students practice basic air manipulation under Kai's watchful eye. Alora nodded, feeling the familiar surge of possibility. The legacy of the dreamers, of Mara, of all who had fought and sacrificed for this transformation, lived on in every shared spell, every broken barrier, every new understanding gained. But more than that, it lived in the certainty that wisdom grew strongest when allowed to flow freely, like the very air that kept their kingdom aloft. The floating kingdom had become what it was always meant to be, not just a wonder among the clouds, but a beacon of hope for all who sought true wisdom, a living testament to the power of shared understanding. As the sun rose higher, Leora's spires caught the light and scattered it like dreams taking flight, carrying the promise of transformation to all who dared to look up and wonder. Epilogue. The journey continues. The evening light cast long shadows through Leora's crystal spires, Alora stood in the temple's highest chamber, where her mother had once received the vision that changed everything. The pendant's warmth matched the sunset's glow as she gazed across their transformed kingdom. Below, Eleanor was welcoming another delegation from the outer lands, while Kai directed his guards in a new protection ritual Lyra had developed. "Some say we've accomplished the impossible," Eleanor said, joining her cousin. "But that's not true, is it? We simply remembered what was possible all along." Alora smiled, touching the crystal walls that had once contained so many secrets. "Mother knew. That's why she left us the tools to find our way back." Casimir appeared at the chamber's threshold, now more teacher than ruler. "The outer kingdoms bring reports of darkness stirring beyond our borders. They seek our guidance." "Then we'll share what we've learned," Alora replied, "just as we always should have." As night fell over the floating kingdom, its lights shimmered like stars caught in crystal. The cloud temples no longer stood as symbols of division, but as beacons of possibility, proof that wisdom shared was wisdom strengthened. And somewhere, in the space between dreaming and waking, Mara's legacy lived on in every freely shared truth, every barrier transformed, every heart open to understanding. The end of one story had become